everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 3 of Bungo Stray Dogs Season 5, and I'm pretty darn excited because Octagawa's back. Octagawa is back, and he's here to save his boo, and I'm really excited about that. Yeah, so we found out that Fukuchi is Kamui. That's fun. Fukuchi is Kamui. He's the leader of the Decay of Angels. Okay, he's also the leader of the Hunting Dogs. Okay, he also has history with Fukuzawa. Okay, and he's working with Fjordor. Okay, and he's this big name celebrity. It's the perfect facade, the perfect cover, and I'm like, okay. I'm very, very excited. I can't believe we're only 3 episodes in. It feels like a lot has happened, but yet it also feels like nothing's happened. So it's the weirdest thing. But I do have some things I want to talk about before we start the reaction, namely some comments, 2 particularly. Although I've been told, I started episode 1 off saying that I thought there were 10 episodes, and someone on YouTube said there were 11. So that actually makes me feel really good. Not only, 1, knowing there are 11 episodes of this season, but also, like I said in episode 1, if you took the 13 episodes from season 4, and at the time it was 10, it was going to be 23 total episodes. And I'm like, well, that's nearly a full season. With 11, it's 24. So I'm like, yeah. We were joking in the Discord. We were like, so basically they just didn't want to give it the Attack on Titan treatment. they didn't want it to be like season 4 part 2 and get people all riled up. So that's what they just decided to do season 4 and season 5. Which is fine. Again, it's fine. I'm excited for the rule of 8 then, because if there's 11 to 13 episodes, usually the rule of 8 means the 8th episode is going to be really good. And I think that's going to be especially true this season, so I'm excited when we get to it. But also, there were just different people commenting on YouTube talking about how, I guess, Comic-Con or Anime Expo, where Asagiri, the creator of Bungo Stray Dogs, was there, they said they would love to have a 6th season and a movie. I'm all for that. I haven't gotten through all of the YouTube comments at this point, but I'm pretty sure the movie, if they were going to make one, we've talked about this on Patreon before, if they do a movie, it's going to be Stormbringer. Right? It would make sense to make it a movie. Right? I think it would. So I feel like if they do a movie, it would be Stormbringer or Beast. Could be Beast. I'm not opposed to either. I do definitely want to later this winter get into Beast. I think that would be fun to do something with Beast, but I want to do like a big encompassing thing. So I've had a lot of people ask me to react to Beast. I kind of want to wait till the entire manga is out for Beast and then do it do a stage play, manga, novel, like big old coverage of Beast. I want to do like a whole big thing, a review of the series as a whole. So I'll probably wait until all of that's ready to go. But I think Stormbringer would be really fun. And several people have noted that it wouldn't translate really well into the beginning of the season, so maybe that's why. But someone else on YouTube was commenting that there's not enough manga content right now to make a 6th full season. Like, we're catching up to where the mangaka is, and I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. I'll just savor this season for what we get for it. Right? It's been a wild trip so far, and then we'll have the manga to look at afterwards. So that's going to be really exciting. That kind of makes sense now, though. If you know the mangaka is running out of material and they're condensing things and cutting corners, that is a tried and true trope with anime studios when they start to get towards the end or catch up with the manga series for some odd reason. I don't know why, but they tend to do weird stuff like this, so that makes sense. But like I said, I don't want manga spoilers. We're going to look at the manga after this, so we'll cover all those bases there. But Alessia Colley talked about how Bones was totally up for the movie in the 6th season whenever it was ready. So I really think Bones does like this show a lot. I think it does care about it. Clearly Bones, like Mob Psycho, is their darling. But I feel like this series, especially the animation, I feel like the animation in season 4 and this season so far has been pretty nice. I think when you compare it to season 1 and season 2, absolutely. Although Dark Age had some really good animation. And season 3 was fine. But I really think season 4, like the colors and the lighting, like it really upped its ante a bit. And I really appreciate Bones for doing that. So I'm glad Bones is behind it. Glad they're supportive. But also, K.A. made the comment that Kamui in Japanese means take over God's authority or God's dignity and power. And that idea of authority makes so much sense with Fukuchi. Fukuchi is so fascinating to me. I love a layered villain. And I mean, there is a time and place for a 90s cheesy villain of the week. There's a time and place for it. I'm not dissing it. but I love a good Shakespearean villain. I love a good layered villain. I love a villain that has very complex motivations and antagonists that are very intriguing. And I think Fukuchi to me is very intriguing because we know little bits and pieces about him, and we've seen some of the layers pulled back, but we've not seen like the whole onion revealed, I don't think. And that's really exciting. I'm excited to piece him together as we go throughout the season, which I think is what we're going to do. Or I could be wrong and they just trounce in this episode and move on to something else. Who knows? But also, I didn't note this in my comments, but I was talking about it with Kaylin V on YouTube, and I really thought about this. It struck me, Kaylin was like, this is like one of the rare like male yandere representations in a manga or anime, and I was like, yeah, you see female yanderes all the time, it seems, but I don't get a lot of like male yanderes very often, and I think it's even more telling that it's a male yandere that is essentially a BL relationship. Essentially, he's going after Fyodor, so it's like interesting, and Fyodor has no clue, or does he? Or does he? That's the question. Several people were like, does Fyodor know that Nikolai is yandere? And he's just like, okay. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me knowing how Fyodor is, but what's interesting is there does seem to be some kind of order to Fyodor, oddly enough, but he doesn't want to admit it. Maybe. We'll talk about it after this episode, I'm sure, because we didn't go back to Dazai or Fyodor at all last episode, so I'm wondering if we're going to touch base with them this episode. I don't know. But I'm really, really excited, y'all. I hope y'all are too. I feel like I've talked enough, but what do we do? So real quick shout out over to Patreon, to our philanthropy tier. Thank you all so much. Thank you to Patreon, to YouTube subscribers, all of y'all for supporting me. I'm so grateful for your support, but the philanthropy tier over on Patreon, they get a very special shout out in videos, as well as getting to break any tiebreakers in the polls that we have on the channel that we're having right now, for example. And so I want to give a shout out to these special patrons who go above and beyond each month to help support me in doing what I love to do, which is ramble and fangirl about these shows with y'all. Because I'll be honest, I don't know anybody else except you all that talk about Bungo Stray Dogs. My brother is not caught up. He's only watched season 1 and season 2, and I'm like, you need to watch season 3, and he still hasn't done it, so I can't talk to him about anything. It's frustrating. I was like, you need to catch up, and he's like, ah. And then he's playing Dragon Quest somewhere, and I'm like, you need to just catch up. So, special shout out to Edgar, to Dana, to Alex Cornejo, to Be Happy, to Kiri, to Librarian of Lang, to Shimoyama, to Nameless Monster, to Natalia Zaharia, to Modern Amethyst, as well as to Tyrone, Anime Annie, Eric, Sunspots, Kuba Lutek, Translucent Men, Anna, Legatus, and Goob. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody on Patreon and YouTube. All of my love. So yeah, we've talked enough. Might as well start, see what happens, and I'm sure it will be nothing of consequence. Famous last words, but we are going to start Bungo Stray Dogs Season 5, Episode 3, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. Hacks. I call hacks. Oh my god. You know it's a good episode when you don't even realize they didn't show us the OP. You don't even realize, and then suddenly at the end you're like, there's the OP. Oh my god. So oh no. Oh, Kamui, Fukuchi, uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Yeah, God over authority, huh? God over dignity and power, huh? Yeah, so, yes. Oh, my God. I am both nervous, terrified, and happy about this episode for a lot of reasons. I'm very happy, first of all, because whenever they first attacked him, they finally, as soon as they started going at each other in slow motion, and Atsushi was like, let's be real. If Akutagawa was really trying to impress Dazai more than anything, and he showed up to Dazai and had killed Atsushi, he knows that Dazai would be disappointed, so he wasn't going to kill Atsushi. So the moment they started running towards each other, I was like, okay, no, they're going to use this moment to team up. That's what they've been hinting at. They got to wait for the right moment. This is the right moment. And then the moment where they attack Fukuchi, and they seemingly killed him, I was like, that was it? I was getting a little mad because I was thinking, oh my god, they've killed him already? We built up the last season and a half and they just killed him in one shot and he's just gonna die and we're not gonna learn anything else about his character? Like, I was thinking, I'm like, we haven't had sudden backstory, we haven't had anything. I was getting really mad and I was wondering if, I was like, did they skip that much of the manga? And then, no. He has time travel powers because why the frick not? And the crazy thing is, we know that Fukuchi's power. We know this about Fukuchi. We know the idea that his power lets anything he uses become 100 times stronger. So, that's that anything he grabs, like he's able to tear the railing off the ship, not because he just makes it a weapon. Anything he grabs is suddenly becomes a weapon to him, essentially. So if you had something, what do you say, the blade was 10 centimeters times 100, what is that, that's 1,000, right? And then 1,000 centimeters, which is 1 meter, right? Which is 3 feet. Right? I'm not a math person. I'm just doing whatever I can. So, so essentially, normally you can only move the blade 10 centimeters, which doesn't seem like much of a big deal. Doesn't seem like a big thing. You could stab somebody in the back with it, essentially. You could stab someone in the back with it, and that'd be about all you could do. But in his case, since he can make it 100 times stronger, he can move it 3 feet. That's not a big amount of difference, but it's enough to be lethal. And that's not the part that's scary about it. It transports, it does time and space. So that should have made sense. And I was just thinking time and space, time is relevant to when he's moving at the moment. No, he can not only move the sword, which seems like a very Nikolai move, right? Not gonna lie. But he can also use it to go back in time. I'm watching a time travel show right now, and people are seemingly dying in that show too. Quit doing this, series. I'm already dealing with the trauma of that. I don't need the trauma of this too. They can't decapitate Akutagawa. No. Surely not. Surely not. Okay, but here's the thing. They said you could transport time and space, meaning that even if Akutagawa somehow gets his hand on the sword, somehow lets it happen, right? He can't move the sword very far because he doesn't have the ability like Fukuchi does. But he could go back in time, essentially, right? He could still go back in time, maybe not as far as Fukuchi, but maybe enough to save Akutagawa. If they decapitate Akutagawa, what do we do with that? What if Akutagawa dies right now? What do we do with that? I mean, okay. Theoretically, if Akutagawa dies, let's just say if it happens, if Akutagawa kicks the bucket, I mean, our options are to use the sword to reverse time, but if Fukuchi leaves with the sword, we can't reverse the time that much, right? That would destroy the fabric of time and space, right? Or, would Akutagawa destroy the fabric of time and space to save his emotional boyfriend? What a romantic gesture. Would he? So yeah, there's that. I think Natsumi could maybe come into play with this, because Natsumi in season 3 during the cannibalism arc, you had Mori and Fukuzawa nearly killing each other, and Natsumi seemingly made them all better. Seemingly, either reversed time or healed them. So, okay. It would be hilarious if the sword was actually made for Natsumi 1,500 years ago. If Natsumi was just this immortal being that just traversed through time and space himself and was just like, I'm just here to be a helpful old guru, you know? And if that was the case with Natsumi, that'd be hilarious. If Natsumi was like a freaking immortal cat and just traveled through time and space and it was his sword that Fukuchi stole. That would be really funny. That would actually be hilarious, right? Because Fukuchi kind of has like a lion motif to him, and Okutagawa has a tiger motif to him, and Natsumi has a cat motif to him, so it could be, and Okutagawa and Atsushi can regenerate. So there's like almost like with Fukuchi, Atsushi, and Natsumi, like this immortal cat motif with all three of them. So that would be kind of cool if Natsumi, if it was his sword, and Fukuchi just ended up with, and he's like, I gotta use my cane instead. But I feel like Fukuchi might be able to save Okutagawa if he magically shows up. That'd be really... I'm trying to draw straws. I'm grasping at any straws to get Okutagawa saved at this point, because I'm like, I don't want him to die. We waited a whole season for him to come back, and you're gonna kill him in an episode? Why? Oh my god. But man, I'm sure glad that I read the manga before diving into this season, because him running, I like that he runs to meet up with Dazai in the woods, like Dazai, as if he was worried. Again, though, that does make sense, because he's so worried that Dazai is going to abandon him. Dazai has caused some emotional distress to Okutagawa, just a wee bit, right? Can we put Dazai up here? We're going to put Dazai up here. He has got Okutagawa, he has got him Stockholm syndromed around his finger. Because, yeah, it's so bizarre, because during Dark Era, Dazai really had nothing to do with Okutagawa, because he didn't like his attitude. He didn't like how he was handling things, and so he was just kind of like, what are you doing? And I love that we actually get to see under Okutagawa's jacket that it's the most frilly, like Jerry Seinfeld frilly shirt. That's amazing. I love it. But I love that Okutagawa doesn't want his handkerchief like whipping in his face as he runs to meet up with Dazai at the spot where they met up all those years ago when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. I love that we went back to the manga with that. That was great. And his eyes like being just crazed, and Dazai looking like all Dark Era. I love it. But the thing about it is, and he says like, he said he left me 4 years ago and then found you. I'm like, has it been 4 years since he's met Atsushi? I don't think it has been. I think that it's been 4 years since Dazai kind of left the Port Mafia and then ended up in the agency, which ended up with him finding Atsushi. But it's not been 4 years since he's met Atsushi, right? But Dazai and Okutagawa, it's such an interesting dynamic, and all Okutagawa wants is for Dazai's approval. And I'm like, you've already gotten it. Dazai's already approved of you. Atsushi's told you as much when you faced Fitzgerald, but Okutagawa just wants Dazai's approval. Because he supposedly said he wanted a purpose in life. Now, and I'm assuming they went and found Gin afterwards, his sister, and like brought her into the fold after he had met Dazai, right? This is interesting though. So Dazai has enlisted Okutagawa. He says, oh, hey, Okutagawa. And he's like, Dazai-san. He's like, oh, I'm sorry to drag you out here from out of the blue, but there's no surveillance here. I wonder why. Where he's like, we're the only ones who know about this place. And he's like, indeed. And then we see him, this is where you and I, where they like met all those years ago. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I need to ask you a favor. It's nothing much. Just the world's about to be torn apart, and there could be war, and I just want to let you know that the world's about to be restored, and there's going to be a fissure with a deep, dark state of chaos emerging in the shape of Fjordor. And so if that happens, can you just be my eyes? I just need a small favor. Just, it's a token, merely a trifle. What I want from you is your eyes to like help me out. Be my eyes, be observant. Now what's interesting is, I'm like, how has Dazai been monitoring everything? Has it been through Okutagawa? Has he been his eyes this entire time? How does that work? What's the deal with that? But he wants him to be his eyes and be a neutral party. Which kind of goes along with what he's doing anyway. He's not killing anybody according to his promise to Atsushi, so he's not been too antagonistic. I love the moss and like how green and the light shining through on both of them. He's like, I need you to be my eyes and to watch over all things and to never side with anyone, don't interfere, and don't be detected. I like that he breaks that rule to go save that sushi, but supposedly it was because of the signal, right? So Dazai telling him, being like, don't side with anybody. Oh no. To make sure it didn't destroy half my shelf back there. He's like, don't side with anybody, don't interfere, and don't be detected. So that makes sense why during all of season 4, we didn't see him. Dazai was like, don't fight the hunting dogs. I know you're going to want to. Don't fight the hunting dogs. Don't interfere, even if your sister gets injured. Don't side with the Port Mafia. Don't side with the agency. Don't side with the hunting dogs. Don't get into a scuffle with anybody. Just be a fly on the wall until you get the signal, right? Just don't get involved. I want you to tell me what all is going on. He's like, that's you. I need your help to save this world, the detective agency, and at Sushi-kun. Now, I love that he puts that sushi in there. So he's like, it's not just the world. I mean, you could be saving the world, not to God, be like, whatever. And he's like, I need you to help save the detective agency. I don't really care for them. But, Chuya was like, I'll save you if Mori tells me to. And then he says, and at Sushi-kun. And I love that he's like, I refuse. Because it's like, that's the trigger. I can't save the were-tiger because I don't want to admit I have feelings. And he's like, whatever colors of flames that engulf the world or the agency are, I don't care. Much less would I ever save the were-tiger. I love that he's like, I don't care about the world or the agency, but especially not him. I'm like, Octagawa, sweetheart. And I feel like Dazai's just sitting there like, just, okay. Saying, are you sure? He's like, sure you will. He's like, why, don't you? I love I love that Dazai, he just has him by the balls. And I don't know why, there was so much happening in this episode, I forgot that the OP just hadn't happened. And it just completely slipped my mind. I was like, what OP? Who needs an OP? We just dive right into this. And then the one thing that is kind of weird about this episode, the one thing that is bizarre, it's not Atsushi's leg glowing as it grows back. That part's fine. We've established that it's regenerating itself. The part that's weird in this episode is that the leg that's been cut off glows. I'm like, is it growing another Octagawa? That'd be amazing if it did. Is it growing another Octagawa off to the side? Because it's still glowing, and I'm like, since it's detached and is severed, you would think that would be the end of it. Oh my god. What if it falls away and grows another Octagawa? And that's how he lives, right? Except his memory is totally different. No. That part was weird animation-wise, and it felt like a censorship where they didn't want to show the bloody stump just sitting there, so they made it glow because that way censorship wouldn't be weird. But yeah, it feels weird that it's still glowing. That's odd. He's like, a flash can end it. And he's like, well, I'll just kill you right now. And then Octagawa's like, yeah, I love that he changed out of his like crew boy, out of his like sailor uniform immediately. He's like, I can't be facing a bad guy without looking the freshest. No. He's like, and he has to be so dramatic. Octagawa, I freaking love him because he is such a diva. Like, he couldn't just appear. He had to make a grand statement showing up on the top of the ship bow in his cloak, being like, every time that were-tiger is plunged into suffering, he returns as an even more troublesome enemy. He's like a Saiyan. The more you get close to killing him, the stronger he comes back. And Octagawa's like, he's got that protagonist syndrome, right? But I just love, he's so double-sided. And Sushi's like, why are you here? And he's like, because of Dazai. That's it. It's the only reason I'm here. Dazai told me to. He's like, I'm supposed to collect information and be detected by neither friend nor foe. To never be seen unless a smoke signal is seen. So I'm guessing that whole prophecy thing in the last episode was maybe a mistranslation. Maybe it should have been signal instead of prophecy. And it was just the smoke signal that Rampo gave off. Good for Rampo to know what's going on. Now I want to know if Rampo has met up with Dazai before all this went down. If Dazai met behind the scenes with Octagawa and Rampo throughout all this, which would make sense, I'm not going to be surprised because Dazai wants to lay the chess pieces down on the table and get them in position. Okay. So that wouldn't surprise me if he gave Rampo being like, look, Octagawa's going to show up. You see that sushi's going to get in there. You give the smoke signal. And it's like, okay, those were his orders. And then Atsushi, bless his heart, he's the biggest cinnamon bean. He's like, Rampo's on smoke flare. And Octagawa's like, yes, I'm glad we're on the same page. Glad you're keeping up, Were Tiger. But yeah, the glow on the leg is weird. He's like, did Rampo predict that too? And he's like, no, Dazai probably met with him. And then Fukuzawa, or Fukuchi. Fukuchi says, this one looks like a pain in the ass to shut up. Fukuchi is going to be a very hard opponent if they don't get that sword away from him. A really hard opponent. And again, we pull back the layers with his character. One thing I really like about Fukuchi is that he appears on the surface to be this like just brawny villain, that he's just super strong. And it's like, well, how do we defeat him? Well, we'll use strategy to defeat him. That'll be the easy thing to do. And then, lo and behold, you use strategy, and Fukuchi's like, well, I've got a time-changing sword, so no. It's like, so what do you do? Now, the one thing I'm nervous about in all of this, I'm very, very nervous, and I don't know at this point, we'll find out this season. I don't know how the manga concludes this arc. I don't know if it may not even conclude this arc. We may go into season 6 with Fukuchi still being a problem. My problem and my worry is usually when a shonen or anime gives us an opponent this powerful with this hacks of an ability, the resolution to it is often a little convoluted. And I'm hoping I'm going to give, because Bungo Stray Dogs, I was so surprised by this episode. We not only went back in time the first time, when we did it the second time, I was like, oh my god, no, we're screwed. I was just like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, that was such a great surprise and reveal. My fear is that I want whatever strategy they use to stop Fukuchi to be smart and to not be convoluted or like plot contriving. And a lot of times when mangaka introduce like really hacks or OP abilities, unless they are met with an equally hacks or OP ability, then it's often a bit contrived on how they resolve it. And I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous because this power is really OP and super ridiculous. And I'm like, how we bend in time and space to stop him, right? Now, if Natsumi is the answer, and Natsumi has like an equal ability of like traversing time and space, I'm going to be like, okay, that we had that set up in season 3 with him healing Mori and Fukuzawa. So if that's how we have to beat Fukuchi, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with that. We've set up Natsumi to have possibly this OP ability as well. I'm okay with it. But yeah, when they were introducing Atsushi and Octagawa fighting him, I was like, really? Because yeah, I mean, nothing against Octagawa and Atsushi. I love Atsushi putting on the coat. I love Atsushi putting on Rashomon. I love the idea of them having to work together, them building trust. We'll talk about that in a second with Dazai. But I'm not going to lie, whenever they're like, yes, this guy that's been around for decades and has killed hundreds of gifted users, Rashomon's going to do the trick. I'm like, is that going to be enough? Is that all it takes? No, it is not all it takes. And that's the problem. They didn't know he had this time and space power, which is a problem, a major problem, right? A big one. And Fukuchi's such a good actor. He's like, I have no intention of revealing. Yeah, he's like, Fukuchi is such a good actor because he puts on this facade of like, oh no, now they're going to work together. They're going to work together and stop me. If only I could stop time and make it not happen. And it's like, yes, I'm just like, yes, please. So Fukuchi is still, he's a good actor. He's a good actor and he doesn't seem afraid. He's like, nope, not worried. I don't know how. I don't know how they're going to beat him. I'm nervous, but I don't know how. He's like, I love that Octagawa tries to be like the most badass. He's like, my job's to feed the fish. I'm going to mince you up and put you in the ocean and it'll be quite nourishing. And Fukuchi's like, are you serious? I feel like Fukuchi is like Frieza from Dragon Ball Z, where he's like, he's heard this line over and over again from other people, just reiterated in different words, right? And the scary thing is that Fukuchi, he draws out their abilities. He sits there, waits for them to attack, figures out the moves that they can do and how they use their abilities, and then he turns back time so he'll already have the knowledge from the future and uses it against them. That's hacks as hell. No! What an insolent gifted you are. And he's like, it's obvious. You're the one who's oblivious to the situation, Were Tiger. He's like, how can you not notice this opportunity? And that's when they stop the ship, which is a problem because they can't call for backup and they're out in the middle of the ocean. It's like Fukuchi was waiting for them to just get to the point where they made things harder for themselves, and then he took advantage of the situation. It's like, how do we even... I'm so baffled by this episode. It's great. He's like, I destroyed the engine room. I trapped the ship here. Isn't it fun? The fact that the ship has a clock tower, now it all makes sense. I'm like, why does the ship go to clock tower? And it's like, yep, nope, we're good. And so he's and I love the idea that Atsushi tries to rationalize that I felt like I was alone before, but now Fukuchi's the one alone. And Akutagawa's like, we're gonna slash his throat and close the case. I love that Atsushi goes, just the two of us, and like the song plays in the background. And Akutagawa says, do we need any more? Yeah, maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe getting more people involved would be a problem. It would be more liability and more people that could get hurt. I'm so flabbergasted and not knowing what we need. And then the whole idea of do we need any more goes back to him meeting Dazai, and Akutagawa says, why me? Why does it have to be me? And so he says, you've got plenty of people to work for you who are stronger and more intelligent than I am. I actually like Akutagawa being a little humble in this moment because he's a diva and he often likes to like brag on himself and tell how strong he is in battle. And you could say part of it's a facade that he's just kind of like trying to inflect this opinion of himself onto others. But I like the little humbleness in Akutagawa where he's like, why? There's people you could get besides me. Why does it have to be me? What's the deal? And Dazai's like, oh, don't sell yourself so short. He's like, do you remember when we first met? And then Akutagawa is saying, I'd remember that night even if I forgot every other detail of my life. Sorry, Ginsberth. I'm going to remember this moment I met Dazai covered in blood. I feel like the fact that Akutagawa says that is so indicative of how much reverence he has. It's like Dazai allowed... It felt very... The meeting between Dazai and Akutagawa, like where he's got blood all over him and the forest is at night, it felt like something out of a vampire novel. It felt like something like Akutagawa wasn't born until the night that he met Dazai. That's what it felt like. It felt like Dazai was a vampire and he like took Akutagawa under his wing, bit him and made him a vampire and was like, come with me. And it was like Louis and Lestat from Interview with the Vampire. It just has those vibes, right? I'm all about it. And then we go back to them under the tree. And the flowers being blood red. And he's like, can you give me a reason to live? And Dazai being like, I can. In like his dark era look with the purplish eyes. Very Mori like, right? He says, why did I invite you into the mafia that day? And he puts his coat around him. Why did I make you work along at Sushi-kun? Back in the cannibalism arc. To develop a special weapon against the demon. So I love the shot of Dazai with the coat around Akutagawa, which again is like the coat that's Rashomon, right? Because we've seen he can use the ability on the white shirt, but it's Rashomon. It's the coat that Dazai gave him, and that's kind of the thing where Mori gave him the coat, and then he gave it to Akutagawa, right? So there's the idea that Dazai talks about the special weapon. I want to break this down real quick because I feel like now that we have Fukuchi introduced into this, it like adds a new element. So he says to make a new generation of double black. So, okay. I'm going to break this down real quick because I think this is pretty interesting. You have, we have Dazai and Chuya. And we have Akutagawa and Atsushi. And we know that Chuya and Dazai are double black. And we know that Akutagawa and Atsushi are new double black. Yep. Okay. And then before, I always said that we had Fukuzawa and Mori, right? And they were kind of like the pre-double black, right? But I would say that we also now have Fukuzawa and Fukuchi Honestly, yeah. That's kind of the weird thing, right? So what's interesting is you have, I feel like Fukuzawa and Fukuchi and Fukuzawa and Mori are kind of parallel to Dazai and Chuya and Akutagawa and Atsushi, right? And the reason I say that is I would think Fukuzawa and Mori are kind of similar to Akutagawa and Atsushi, where you have two individuals that did not grow up together. They didn't know each other from their youth. They met during adulthood or close to adulthood, and they are like polar opposites, like polar opposite characters. They couldn't be more oil and water, but they worked together very interestingly, right? And they both had a little bit of similarity there. Whereas you have Fukuzawa and Fukuchi and Dazai and Chuya, who both seem to know each other from their younger days. Like you have Dazai and Chuya knew each other from like back in 15 years prior when they were 15 years old. And then you have Fukuzawa and Fukuchi who knew each other from childhood. And they're characters who are different, but who have a lot in common. And they have so much in common, in fact, that it pits them against each other, right? There's some very important differences, obviously, between Fukuzawa and Fukuchi, and there's some important differences between Chuya and Dazai, but they're more alike than they let on, right? Whereas Fukuzawa and Mori could not be more different. Akutagawa and Atsushi could not be more different. So there's some interesting parallels here. Fukuchi and Fukuzawa clearly did not work out. Nope. But, and Fukuzawa and Mori did not work out. Dazai and Chuya, they work together really well. The problem is their powers are not very compatible. They're compatible in the fact that Dazai can stop Chuya from destroying the world. But Chuya can't amplify anything that Dazai does. Dazai's kind of the odd man out. He can nullify abilities, but that's like it. He can't really project that anywhere, right? And Dazai doesn't have a regeneration ability. He literally can he's just insanely intelligent, insanely bold, and has the power that can nullify abilities. That's pretty much it. Whereas Akutagawa and Atsushi both have abilities that are extremely powerful, and when they work together, it's oddly compatible. So I feel like Dazai, he's like, I want to create a combination that can defeat Fjordor and do what Chuya and I cannot. And that's what y'all can do, because neither of you are going to run off the handle like Chuya would if I wasn't around, but you both can work together and you're compatible and you can possibly defeat Fjordor together. What's also really sad about all of this is that we've talked about in Bungo Stray Dogs that there's a theme of generational trauma and the idea that it just gets passed down from generation to generation. And that's exactly what it seems like here. It's like Fukuzawa had his like time with Fukuchi and things ended in trauma. And then he moved on to Mori, things ended in trauma. And then you have like Mori ends up making Dazai and Chuya together and passing that trauma onto them. And then Fukuzawa starts using Dazai to pass it on to Atsushi and then getting him and Akutagawa together. So it's just the cycle of generational trauma that just keeps going. But Akutagawa accepts this purpose that Dazai gives him, and here we are. He's like, I need you guys to do what I cannot. He's like, for this moment, you've got to work with Atsushi, whether you like it or not. And then, yeah, so the fact that Fukuchi could nearly slice the ship in half, that should be a problem. And then he's like, Dazai didn't abandon me. Everything is a trial. Just the idea of Dazai didn't let me down. He didn't abandon me. So there's a little Stockholm Syndrome-ish to it there too, because it's like Dazai goes back to, or Akutagawa goes back to Dazai after all these years. He's like, oh, he didn't abandon me. I'm like, yeah, there is. Dazai's an interesting character because I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, Dazai is using Akutagawa because he knows that he's the only one that can really work at sushi with him like this and be successful. And I'm like, Dazai, did he not abandon you? I guess not. We could argue that. But he seemed pretty mad at him in Dark Era, but what have you. And so they managed to get away. I love Atsushi saving him. It's very cute. Atsushi has a thing for just jumping off of things. Atsushi's like, let's yoink, let's get out of here, let's go. And what's funny is, again, we talk about how they're very different. Akutagawa's methods is just like to charge straight in, guns a-blazing, and Atsushi's like, let's think things out first, and like runs away. So it is very different. I love them like jumping through the window there. And of course, Octagawa is like, why are you running? Like the meme. He's like, why'd you run away? And Atsushi's like, did you see that thing? Didn't think you were going to live. He's like, there's no way you saw him. He's god of war in human form. For once, Atsushi's not wrong. Maybe they should have ran, because how are they going to stop him, right? How are they going to stop him? But he was debating about running in the last episode. And then, of course, Octagawa was like, I'll just throw myself into the fray, and if I die, I die. And Atsushi's like, well, why? And he's like, because otherwise Dazai won't need me anymore. What's interesting here is we talk about how different they are, but I feel like I was waiting for Atsushi in this moment to talk to Octagawa, because, and I feel like there's just no time. There was no time in this episode in the situation to do it. But I feel like at some point it's going to get brought up about Dazai's relationship with both Atsushi and Octagawa. Right, I'm going to put Ats and Octagawa. Because Atsushi, for him, for both of them, he's become like this savior, right? And I like the idea that we had the headmaster for Atsushi and we had Mori with Octagawa, and both of them were kind of these pseudo parental figures, but not really. Instead, it's Dazai. Dazai is literally the parental figure for both of them in the weirdest of ways. But they both like look up to him. What's interesting is that Atsushi doesn't really at this point have a desperation for Dazai's attention. Instead, he's using Dazai kind of as a mentor figure in his head. He's replaced the headmaster with Dazai to be like his voice of reason, right? He views Dazai as the voice of reason for him. Whereas for Octagawa, he sees it as purpose. So we have reason and purpose. And if he's like, if I can't do it for Dazai, then who am I going to do it for, right? And we go back to that whole illness thing, which we'll talk about. There are so many shots in this episode that were just like boyfriend shots. It was just like the grabbing of the head, the rescuing from side to side, the grabbing of the shirts, the running together, the wearing each other's clothes. It was just your typical boyfriend things. I'm a big Octagawa and Atsushi shipper, so I was loving it. Not loving Octagawa getting decapitated. And he talks about how Dazai did abandon him 4 years ago and replaced me with the shiny new thing that was you. And Atsushi's like, well, what? Atsushi's like, I didn't ask for this, so leave me alone. He said, but perhaps I'm wrong. Isn't everything a trial? Is it not all an extension of the purpose given to me in the forest that night? I love that Atsushi's just like, what are you talking about? Atsushi's like, I don't understand the forest, what you mean. He's like, a trial? And he's like, you mean Fukuchi's a trial? Yeah, he's like, no, you are. Meaning that maybe Dazai put me together with you so that I can prove myself by overcoming the sweet summer child that is you. And I was like, Octagawa, you sweet tsundere, why? Why do you misconstrue? I also love the guy's words where he's like, oh shit, I overslept. Great. It's a great time. There's moments from Link Click that are like calling back in this episode. Like the whole thing with the guy choking. I'm not going to spoil Link Click for y'all, but it's a plot point in there. I was like, what? And then characters being on the verge of death. I'm like, why? It's just funny. I also like the guy fired the gun and both of them are like, we caught the bullets. What do we do? What do we do? So yeah, and then they managed to get out of there. Octagawa did not kill the guy. He said, don't kill anybody for the next 6 months. He says, I keep my promises. That's another thing. That's why whenever Fukuchi was trying to win him over and was like, come to the dark side, and was acting like a Sith Lord, asking him to come to the dark side, and Octagawa was like, sorry, we're telling you I'm going to do it. I'm like, you just said you kept your promises. So I was really hesitant when they teamed up together to fight, when they seemed like they were going to fight each other before they teamed up. I was like, in my head going, so did you lie? It seemed like a plot contrivance, but then they made it into, that was part of the twist. And I was like, okay, good. Glad we're all working together. Glad we've decided to do this. And then Atsushi, I like that Atsushi is the more pessimistic person in this episode. It's a nice twist. Usually you think that Octagawa would be the pessimistic person and Atsushi would be optimistic, but here it's reversed. Where Atsushi's like, no, this is a bad deal. And Octagawa's like, oh, quit being so whiny. And it's like, I don't know, Atsushi might have been onto something. And that's why he was talking about them using the strategy of making him wear the coat. The beast beneath the moonlight, Rashomon, Koko Zesso. I was like, I love that Akutagawa gives names to like all of his abilities. I love it. It's very shonen. It's fun. It's very Bleach-like. And then they like has Edward Scissorhands come out. The moment he was like, well, these claws can even pierce and slice a god. I was like, can they? I was starting to question it. I was like, are we sure? Are we sure about that? I really wanted their powers to combine and be purple because we have blue and red. I wanted their powers to combine and be purple. And maybe by the end of this series, if they like do some crazy move together, it'll be like a purple move and it'll really truly be them. The ultimate trust where they combine together into this beautiful purple butterfly. It'd be great. But Atsushi has this idea that if we go underwater, we can get him. We can get him underwater and slice him. And maybe that would have worked. Maybe. But we did not have such luck. The things did not go according to plan. And I'm sorry, but the submarine, it's in poor taste. So I'm not going to make the joke, but y'all. I was like, oh, we could make a lot of jokes about it, but we're not going to do that. But yeah, you all know. I'm sure in the comments they're going to be like, well, I'm sure somebody on Crunchyroll's comments have already made a joke about it. But yeah, we're going to ambush him from behind. I think if they had gotten him underwater, it would have worked out a lot better. But the best laid plans, we don't get to that point, right? We just don't get to that point, sadly. And Fukuchi is just sitting there waiting for him. And they're like, we failed. He's just sitting there waiting. He's like, you guys take long enough? Did you get done making out? Are you all good? Good. Got your last quickie in before I kill you both? Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that. It explains so much about Fukuchi's confidence. Because why would he have to worry? Why would he have to be afraid? He has a literal time and space manipulating sword. Why should he worry about anything? I'm fascinated. And I feel like now it explains why Fyodor follows him. Now it all makes sense. Because before last episode, I was like, he's in charge of Fyodor? I mean, Dazai made the comment about the big personality, but like I said, I feel like that's not what gets Fyodor, because Fyodor, I feel like, would follow somebody deadpan as long as they were strong. And I was like, when we just thought Fukuchi was like just brawn strength, I'm like, would Fyodor really follow him? But now we know why. Now Fyodor's like, oh, you can manipulate time and space. Oh, okay. I feel like Fukuchi met Fyodor and killed him, and then went back in time and was like, do you want that? Do you want me to actually do that, or do you want to follow me? And Fyodor was like, nope, I want to live. Let's do this. I feel like that's the case. I feel like that's exactly what happened, right? And if Fukuchi somehow was able to be, which Nikolai explained the magic trick already, but I was like, if they use this as a narrative device to say that's how Nikolai lived, because he went back in time and changed things, why not? Why not? All bets are off, right? All bets are off. That's the scary thing. That's the scary part of it, is that all bets are kind of off at this point, right? That Asagiri, somebody in the comments on Patreon for the last episode was talking about the Asagiri at the Anime Expo, was saying that this is not a story. It's not a story for you to feel good. And I was like, oh no. I was like, oh no. They're like, this is for the people that don't want just like a simple happy ending story. This is for people that live and breathe in like the chaos. And I was like, at the time I was like, oh, Asagiri, what are you saying? I don't know how to feel about this. And now I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this. I don't like this. I'm like, what do I do? And then I like that Atsushi tries also to understand Fukuchi's backstory. And he was like, did the battlefield change you? Did you see too many deaths happen around you? It felt like he was trying to equate Fukuchi to Yasano in a way, being like, did you see too much death on the battlefield and it changed you? And he's like, and it was interesting. What's interesting, and again, Fukuchi tries to say, I feel like Fukuchi is trying to one-up and make Fukuzawa feel bad, because he's like, well, I was the one torturing and killing people on the battlefield. I think the one difference between Fukuchi and Fukuzawa is he said civilians, women and children. I was killing too. And I'm like, okay, that is a big difference. I'm not going to say it's not. But I feel like Fukuchi underscores, like, everything Fukuzawa's done. Fukuzawa's killed guys too. He's been killing people left and right. So has Mori. But Mori kind of gets off on it, so Mori kind of revels in it, so we can't really compare anything with Mori. But Fukuzawa, I feel like Fukuzawa and Fukuchi are not too dissimilar. It's, again, Fukuzawa found his purpose through Rampo, and Fukuchi was alone. That's a thing, too. That's the other thing, too. And I think it needs to be brought up with this as well. It's interesting that Fukuchi tries to recruit Akutagawa. Not at Sushi, because he knows the Were-Tiger's a sweet summer child. He is not going to join him no matter what. But he tries to recruit Akutagawa, I feel, because he sees similarity with Akutagawa. He's like, you revel in violence just like I do. You revel in the blood of battle and victory. Join me, be my apprentice, and we can conquer the galaxy and rule as pseudo-father and pseudo-son. And Akutagawa's like, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. You know, it's one of those moments. But I think it's interesting, and I think that another reason why Dazai puts Akutagawa and Atsushi together is because he sees what Akutagawa could become. I don't know. I mean, obviously at this point, Dazai had not met Fukuzawa. He couldn't have possibly known about Fukuchi. But there is something to be said by Dazai. If he had been left alone, what would he have become? If he had met Ongo and Oda, what would he have become? And he knows that. And so he knows that when people like Akutagawa, like Dazai, like Fyodor, like Fukuchi, when those people are left alone to their own devices in this world of despair and violence, then they kind of they sink deeper and deeper into the darkness, and it's harder to get out. And Dazai's just lucky that he met Oda, who got him out of the darkness. And then we had Fukuzawa, who met Rampo, who got him out of the darkness. And we have Akutagawa, who he's put with Atsushi to get him out of the darkness. So all these characters that have had the potential to sink into despair, they've been saved by someone. But there wasn't anybody for Fukuchi. Nobody saved Fukuchi, and he just sank into the darkness. Nobody saved Fyodor, and he sank into the darkness. That's kind of, that's the thing. They don't have that camaraderie that the others do that saved them. And so he's just like, neither you nor Fukuzawa know that battlefield. That's why you can believe in a benevolent state. He's like, once you see how shitty the world can get, you won't believe that there can be any peace. And I'm like, that's so sad, because yeah, the world is an awful place. Again, it's that line from Attack on Titan, the world is cruel, but it's beautiful too. And the problem is when people forget that last half of the line, when they forget that the world does have good in it, and they think it's just awful, right? And my dogs have decided to be terrible. So yeah, he says, I've endured countless trials and tribulations and have suffered. He like becomes Sarah from Labyrinth. He's like, I've braved the dangers, fought through dragon's fire, faced insurmountable, inconceivable measures to reach the Goblin King, you know. And then he's like, I, humble Ochi, shall embrace the cold cynicism of all creation. Suggesting that it doesn't care, that the world doesn't care about you, and it's just this nihilistic view that he's like, I'm going to embrace it and just deal out whatever justice I want and not care what anybody says. I like it. I like the layers. I'm enjoying it. I see why Fyodor, the cold cynicism of all creation, sounds like Fyodor got off on that line. He was like, yes, let's join forces. As soon as he said that, he's like, sign me up for the Angels right now. As soon as he heard it, it all makes sense now why he follows him. And then those two, they go at him and he manages to stop him. The thing that got me was when he threw the rock. And at first you think he's going to throw a rock, but because it's 100 times stronger, it's like a projectile bullet. It's like a bazooka. I was like, oh shit, oh no. And then he's like, did you think you could fight me if you worked together? And he's like, no. He's like, you individually, I'll kill you, whatever. And he tosses his sword away. And then he's like, the battlefield is a garden of carnage where upon justice, courage, and conviction die all the same. The only possible paths are a death that is merciful or one that is not. So he's like, once you enter battle, someone's going to die. And that's just how it goes. Once you decide violence, once you choose violence, someone's going to die. There is no getting out of it. My question is, my only question, and I'm sure that we're going to get answers, so don't feel the need to answer my question, but I'm just letting you know. My one question in all of this at this point is, how does he pull the sword out? Like, how does he summon the sword? Has it been there the entire time? Is there a special ritual? Is he connected to it somehow? How did he get the sword to come out of hiding? Has it just been there the entire time? It should have been obvious. The sword he has in the poster was purplish, so it should have made sense. And he said it was never used in battle, as it was made specifically for ritual activities. So it was like a sword used for a ritual until I wielded it. So it was meant for something else, which sounds something like something that Sumi would maybe know about. My thing is, they gave Fukuzawa the sword, like a ritualistic sword, at the beginning of season 4. And it should have been foreshadowing, I guess, that there was going to be a ritualistic sword that could do this. I'm wondering if Fukuzawa, the sword that he has some connection. If there's going to be something coming back to that, a call back to that maybe. At this point, we're calling back to like some old school stuff in the manga. At this point, all bets are off. All bets are off, right? And then he says, he's basically never lost in battle with this damn sword. And then at first, Atsushi's like, I can use the tiger eyes, see what's coming. And I'm like, don't announce what you're going to do in a shonen, because it'll usually backfire. And then, yeah, his ability is very similar to Nikolai, where he can traverse time and space. Now that Atsushi knows this, if they somehow make it out alive, how, I don't know, would he use what he knows from Nikolai to possibly predict something with that? I don't know. I don't know how they're getting out alive. I don't. I have no clue. Unless Natsumi shows up or something, how you're going to keep Akutagawa's head from getting severed off his body and being decapitated? No clue. Not a bit. I'm in the dark 1000%. And so he notes, he was like, he talks about their abilities being like, if only you had done such and such. He's like, the tiger's abilities are evasive and effective in frontal attacks, meaning he could charge in. The black coat is effective in defense and blind spots. If you work together, you would truly be a foe that would be... The moment he was like telling them how they could work together and defeat him, I was getting a little nervous, because I was like, well, if they manage to get out of this, they can just do exactly what you said, right? Atsushi does have a really cute face where he like lifts his face up to like listen to him. You only see his cheeks and his eyes. It's really cute. It's a good animation. I like that. He's like, for that, I would have needed to trust Akutagawa. And then he looks over at Akutagawa, who's like just barely getting up. And then that's when he's like, nah. He's like, we're going to work together. And that's when... Now, I was wondering why Fukuchi hadn't killed them at this point. Because I was like, why don't you just kill them, get it over with? And then he said he wanted them to suffer. And I'm like, okay, you're torture people. Makes sense. But then he said the real reason is he wants to get information. I'm like, that's the real reason. He wants to know who sent you. How did you know about this? How did you get this far? He wants to know what Dazai has told them. He wants to know it's Dazai involved. So, yeah, that makes sense why he hasn't killed them yet. But... he's probably sensing that they might actually be a threat, and he'll need to. So, but then he's like, he teases him to become his apprentice. And I'm like, really? You don't think he's not going to kill you? He said, I never said to turn on him. That's the thing. I feel like he's like, oh, you don't want to let Dazai down? Oh, well then just become my apprentice anyway. Kill this were-tiger, and I'll make you the strongest gifted, even among the hunting dogs. And then you can go back to your master and see how impressed he is. I'm like... Dazai ain't gonna be impressed by that. No. Also, I do love the idea of seeing Akutagawa in the hunting dog's outfit. It's very cool. I like it. The red looks good on him. He can pull off the red with the black and white hair. And Dazai's like, I only wear black, bitch. No, thank you. He's like, I have a reason to negotiate with you. I want the were-tiger dead. His facial expression when he looks over at Atsushi is a little bit creepy. Like, Atsushi's clearly a problem to him. So he's like, let's get rid of him now. He can regenerate. Let's just use him. Let's use you to get rid of him. You were never motivated by the just act of stopping a terrorist in the first place. I like that Fukuchi seems to like, he almost acts like he knows Akutagawa, like he's figured him out. And Akutagawa's like, get back. He's like, no. He's like, in other words, you have no motivation to kill me. I'm like, oh, well, Dazai seems like he'd be pretty big motivation enough. He's like, is his life that important to you? I love that the little expression on Akutagawa's face when he's like, is Atsushi's life that important? And I'm like, yes, it is, but Octagawa doesn't want to admit it. And then he's like, get up, were tiger. It's like, yeah. He's like, good. He's like, I love that Fukuchi's like, you're not going to admit you like him, are you? You tsundere. Now fight him. Now fight. It's great. I love it. I love it. What's also fun is that I'm watching, and I've been watching, Kuroko's Basketball and Ace of the Diamond and Attack on Titan. And the voice actor for Octagawa voices all three characters from all of those shows. Totally different characters. Totally different. Like, imagining Kuroko and Raichi with this voice is just, it sends me. I'm like, there's no way. I can't imagine it. It's so raspy and gravelly as Octagawa, right? And he's like, I promised I would kill you in 6 months' time. I'm just doing it a little earlier. That's my purpose in life, is to kill you. And he's like, I love that. I love that Sushi's remark. Why are you so obsessed with your purpose? Why do you care about the purpose of life, Octagawa? I love it. And then he says, I've not told anybody this, but I have an illness of the lung. And Sushi's like, what? Which we've known all along. We've known since the very beginning of the series that Octagawa is sick. He's sickly, right? We've known that since the very beginning. Dazai has said as much. We've known he's been sickly from the very start. But he says, my time is short, and I cannot allow myself to disappoint Dazai-san in the time that I have left. Now, he says that all in front of Fukuchi, I'm assuming to make the ruse more convincible or believing. Is it true that Octagawa doesn't have as much time left on Earth? I don't know. Don't tell me. But I'm torn between, because usually a lie has sprinklings of truth in it. I do believe Octagawa has this disease of the lung. We know that much. But I don't know if his time is short or if he just says that so Fukuchi will believe him in fighting Atsushi so they can make the ambush work. What would be really great if Atsushi didn't catch on and really thought that Octagawa was about to die and just fell for it. It seems like that's the case. And he's like, I see. And then they both look at each other where he's like, I'm sorry. The moment he said I'm sorry too, I was like, Atsushi, Octagawa would never say I'm sorry if he was truly attacking you. Let's be real. He would just go for it. But no. Then they turn around. And then I like that it took Atsushi a minute. Like, I feel like Octagawa was saying all these things to like be like, do you get it? I'm working with you, and like winks. And then as they're running, that's when Atsushi's like, wait a minute. I love it. I love it. He's like, well, how would Dazai react? Dazai would not be happy if he learned that Octagawa let Atsushi die. He would not. And so they use trust and attack. And it's this great moment of like shonen, the power of the Nakama. We use trust and friendship to win the day. And it's like, okay. And I was like, really? That's all it took? That's all it took? And then nope, we go back in time. He's like, revealed it. Now here's the thing. He gave, right? Or no, he took back the damn paper. No, he took the paper because he's like, mission's complete. He's like, mission's complete. And he took the page from the book. But then he's like, where did the katana cut in the last moment right before he died? Where was it? What did it cut in that last minute? And then Octagawa's like, what's the matter? We won. And he's like, no. And then it all goes back. The perfect ambush. And nope. He stabs Octagawa, and that is not what happens. And gets his arm cut off. And he's like, my blade traverses space, but it also traverses time. Uh-huh. Yep. Okay, and it's purple. So it's purple together. And I am very curious because when Octagawa and Atsushi teamed up, I wanted their colors to turn purple, like the blue and red mixing together. I wanted it to be purple, right? And I'm going to be curious if that blade, if the way to stop it isn't something connected to the two of them working together. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how that's going to be, but I feel like it needs to be a connection somehow between them. I don't know. It'd be cool if it was like a Dragon Ball Z moment and it was like Chuya, Dazai, Fukuzawa Mori, Octagawa, and Atsushi all against Fukuchi, and he's like, you're the odd one out. You're the third wheel. And that's how they defeat him. I am clueless. I am stumped. I am clueless how they're going to stop him. I am going into this completely blind. Yeah. Aminogazan cuts through the past. And then, yeah, they get out, and you think that they're, like, gonna escape. And I'm like, oh my god, well, that's it, right? But no! Then he goes back in the past to stop them from escaping. He's like, the moment that you let me pull the sword out, it was over. And it's like, no, that the moment you pull the sword out, you gotta run. You gotta get out of there, or he's gonna just keep reversing time. What do we do? And he says, bravo. And then, what does he do there? Yeah, the blade, like, cuts his head! Cuts his head! Like, ow! How? How we getting out of this? How we getting out of this? I have no earthly clue. You end episode 2. You end episode 2 and you think, okay, well, we've ended episode 2, so we know Octagao shows up at the end. So they're obviously going to either fight or flight from Fukuchi, and they're probably going to fight him because Atsushi and Octagawa. But the end of this episode, it's like, well, Octagawa's getting his head cut off, and Atsushi has no way to defend him. So what do we do? I have no clue. I have no idea. No earthly idea. Unless, the only thing I can think of is unless he, like, stabs Octagawa and kills him and then reverses time and said, look what I can do. Now tell me all you know and I'll let you go. Like, unless he does something like that where he tries to interrogate them and say, I'll kill you and you can see how I'm going to as I'm going to show you unless you tell me everything you know. I don't know if it's going to be an interrogation technique. I don't know if he's actually going to kill Octagawa and that's it. And that's the big reveal this season is Octagawa dies. I don't know if Natsumi's gonna step in out of the blue. I don't know if somebody else, if Tanizaki is found on the ship and he uses like the light screen to save them. I don't know. I'm so lost. I don't know, and I don't want any spoilers. I don't want any clues. I don't want any hints. I want nothing. I've never felt so terrified and yet so elated to be in the dark. And here we are. So yeah, wow, I've talked for like nearly an hour. Worth it. So I know it's gonna be really hard not to spoil, and I'm sorry, but otherwise, I'm excited to know your comments down below. Or just don't comment and be like, she'll wait, or just do like all caps. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll back next time with more Bungo Stray Dogs. Bye!